Hey everybody. So I've kind of changed the room today. The kids are gone, and so I'm going to shoot from my living room, which feels weird. And the dog is here, so hopefully she sleeps and doesn't interrupt. But this will be Phoenix Incandescent, Chapter 15, Donuts and a Date. And here we go. Charlotte watched the ripples in her tea as she stirred her spoon absent-mindedly early the next morning. Outside it would still be dark for hours, but inside the fireplace roared with heat and light, and a tempting waft curled through the air with the promise of hot, fresh doughnuts. Charlotte raised her head off of her fist and took another sip of the hot tea. She had been too nervous to sleep well, and she found that the company of others, even if it was limited to grunts and sharp commands, was comforting. She squared her shoulders back and softened her eyes that kept wandering to the fire when she thought nobody was looking. She was curious about fire in a way she had never been before. Why was it that life-giving and destruction seemed to walk hand in hand? Basil placed a container on the table in front of her cup and rapped it with his knuckles. He tipped it up so she could see inside. Granola. Charlotte looked into his eyes and nodded her thank you. She knew that he wanted her to have food from home for the trip tomorrow. He had tried to teach her how to cook years before, but he was an impatient teacher and she was a daydreaming learner. It hadn't taken many burnt meals for them to call it quits. Basil wrapped his knuckles near her hand and turned back to the ovens. Charlotte thought of Beau and the plans for today. She knew where she might want to go, but she didn't know how long it took for him to go anywhere, especially with somebody riding along. How little she knew of his people. She thought of Bliss and her invitation. She would take her up on it, and soon. There were questions she needed to ask Beau as well. Where would they live? When and where would they marry? She blushed and dug her fingers into the underside of the table. Calm. She took several deep breaths and calmed the heat back down. There, she could do this. Morning, Charlotte. Spindle sat down next to her. I want a full account of your adventures when you return. Charlotte raised an eyebrow and sat up straighter. Of today? Of course not, Spindle laughed and shook his head. Chime will, though. I want to know about your adventure to find this mysterious kidnapper. I'll miss you, Spindle. That's nice, Spindle chuckled, but I won't miss you. It's just that we storytellers need new material occasionally. Charlotte raised her eyebrows. Just be safe, Basil grunted from the hearth. I will. Charlotte tapped her fingers on the container. Do I get to hear some of my father's stories once I get back? It's not my place, Basil said. Then whose place is it? Your father's. So they still had hope that he would return. Charlotte traced the outside ring of the container. She wanted her parents to return too, but how likely was it that the fairies would let them come back? So what are your plans for today? Spindle asked. She and Beau have a date planned, Basil said. Do you need a chaperone? Spindle teased. Charlotte ran her fingers down her arm. Nope, I already have one. I wish I had a donut to fix that. Basil sat down next to her with a large mug of coffee. I wish there was a donut for each of life's problems, Charlotte added. There is, Chime laughed. She settled down on the bench next to Spindle. It's called a chocolate donut with sprinkles. Sprinkles solve most everything. What sprinkles don't fix, time will eventually wear away, Basil added. Matches rolled his eyes and groaned from across the table. Such a sage room at an early hour. Laughter spilled from Charlotte's lips before she knew what was happening. She didn't know if it was the donuts, or Match's early morning seriousness, or simply too much built-up stress that had finally bubbled out of her body in release. She did know that it felt good. The Hobbs all stared at her for a moment before joining in laughs, giggles, hoots, and guffaws. How is anybody supposed to get any sleep around here? Beau entered the back door and placed his windboard up against the wall. It's good to hear you laugh, Lottie. Sit, you're just in time for donuts. Basil waved Beau over. How do you like yours? Beau put his hand on Charlotte's shoulder. I like mine curvy with lots of character. He sat down next to her and let his hand fall down her back and settle onto her hip. Chime giggled. Basil chuckled and got up from the table. Charlotte blushed and dug her fingers into the underside of the table again. The heat settled. She placed her head into her hand again and smiled at Beau. Basil slid small plates over them before settling a larger plate of donuts down at each end of the table. Beau nestled his head next to Charlotte's. He whispered, Where do you want to go? Trust me, if we can't get there, maybe we can think of a similar idea. Do you want to go to the moon? I'll find you a big pile of cold rocks. Do you want to fly toward the sun? I can find a hot desert. Do you want to climb a tree? I'll find a tree so tall we can see for miles. Charlotte leaned her head against his. How about the beach? Bo's eyes widened. So you want to be really adventurous today. Welcome to Introductory Surfing the Wind and Water all in one day. Cara Mia, you speak my language. Will it be okay? I'm not sure how long it'll take to get there, or whether you can fly both of us, or it's perfect. Bo rubbed her back slowly as he made a dent in the pile of donuts. I'm looking forward to spending a day with you. Charlotte took another bite of breakfast to distract herself from blushing again. Bo was in a romantic mood today, and she was determined that the day didn't end up in her burning anything. She wiped her mouth with her napkin. So how long does it take to fly places? A lot of it depends on the wind. In this part of the country, I can speed up travel considerably if the wind is right. He grinned and winked. Plus, I have a magic wind board. They waved goodbye to the kitchen full of hobs and got on the same board they'd used the night they snuck out to look for Raven and Ebby. It was dark when they left, but Charlotte was relaxed. This time she had daylight to look forward to. She was tucked into Bo's right side, his arm wrapped around her waist and her right arm tucked underneath his. He had been either singing songs or telling stories from his homeland the entire trip. She liked the bedtime story about Donovan the Daring, and she couldn't help wondering how much, if any, was true. Then there was the ancient creation story of the first two bronze eagles, Enna and Paddon, which made Charlotte queasy. She was relieved that Bo followed that with the naughty tale of Daisy, who fell in love with the forbidden man. Is that the end of the story? Charlotte blushed. Yes. Bo tried to straighten his lips but failed. Charlotte laughed. And you tell me this while flying because? Bo blushed and laughed. I wasn't thinking exactly. Is it, true? Charlotte laid her head against Bo's chest. Which part? He took a sharp breath in. She turned around his arms and laid her cheek against his cheek. The making love while flying part. I guess you'll have to wait and see now, won't you? Bo kissed her forehead and turned her back around. Now stop it, I'm trying to fly. She giggled. You know, I've been so stressed since that dinner when I dressed up and ended up burning up my clothes because I was having, those kinds of feelings for you. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to be around you without exploding something, and I was hurting so much inside. You what? Bo grabbed her arms and turned them into a sharp spiral that led to the ground. Charlotte sighed and stepped off the board when they landed. Bo paced back and forth in front of her, muttering under his breath and shaking his head. Charlotte waited patiently. You should have told me the truth. He finally stopped pacing. I asked you what happened that night, and you refused to tell me anything. No, you listen to me, Charlotte. I've been really patient with you these last several weeks, but you are going to cross a line with me. For somebody who is so sick of secrets being kept from her, you sure are keeping a lot of secrets from others. I'm not keeping secrets, Bo, Charlotte shouted. It's not keeping secrets if you don't know what's going on yourself. Bo put his hands on his hips. Charlotte matched his gesture and stepped closer to him. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about that night, Bo. She felt her skin heat from neck to nose. I was afraid. She felt the wells of water rise in her eyes. I was afraid that we might not ever be able to be intimate. Bo's shoulders relaxed and he dropped his arms. Cara Mia. He chuckled and tugged her forward into his arms. They stood quietly, wrapped in each other's arms. The black sky slowly purpled as the tiniest glimmer of sun peeked above the horizon. I think that we will be fine. But you don't know that, Bo. But I believe it, Charlotte, and there are many things in life that are made for believing. He ran his fingers through her hair slowly. It must be hard to go from being able to touch and be touched to having to watch not only your every move, but the moves of others as well. I just don't want to hurt anybody. Bo sighed. I'm talking about you, Lottie, not everybody else. I know for a fact that it's been hard on you. Your face mirrors your emotions. Charlotte stepped back and crossed her arms. She turned her head to the side. Pink now warmed the horizon and reached up to swirl with the light blue that blanketed across the sky. She reached up and placed her fingers across her lips. Did her face really reflect her feelings? If somebody stared hard enough, long enough, would her secret show? She dropped her hand and straightened. She turned back to Bo, calmed the muscles in her face, and lifted her eyes. He caught her gaze. You've been through a lot the last several weeks. So have you. Again, I'm talking about you. It's okay to do that now and then, you know. Bo teased her hair and kissed her head. You are considerate. She reached up and stroked his jaw. My father taught me a lot by how he treated my mother. Remind me to thank him. Charlotte placed her hand in his hand. She did want to speak with him about the hard things that were swirling through her mind, but right now wasn't the moment. You are right. Things have been hard. I've been trying to deal with it all, but I'm not always good about it. You'll get better at it. He nodded up at the fluffy mixture of warm and cool colors painted across the morning sky. Are you ready to finish the trip? Charlotte kissed him lightly on his stubbly cheek. Yes, please. Bo blushed when she stepped on the board and stood against him. She batted her eyes and teased. What is it? Daisy's just a story. He blushed deeper. I'm not sure if it works that way. He scratched the back of his head. My dad and I are pretty tight, but not that tight. Charlotte snorted. Want me to ask him? Bo paled, but he fixed her with stern eyes. Absolutely not, blunt woman. We can figure it out on our own, thank you very much. He wrapped his arm around her, but he left some space between them this time. I can't believe we're doing this, Charlotte yelled with delight some time later. She stood up on her toes and took a full breath in. The cold wind at home had been gradually replaced with a gentle warm breeze. It is practically winter and we're going to the beach. The shimmering blue-green shoreline stretched before them. Bo tightened his grip on Charlotte. If I had known that you wanted to visit the beach this much, I would have brought you years ago. I don't believe you. She flattened back down the soles of her feet and smirked over at him. You've never shown interest in flying me anywhere. That doesn't mean I didn't want to. After I dropped you when we were kids, I figured you would never trust me in the air again. Guess it saved us from getting into more trouble than we did. Bo shrugged and laughed. I guess there is that. We're here. We won't have to worry about who sees us. This is my uncle's property, and it's protected from Danes by magical barriers. He's traveling, or I'd introduce you right now. They landed on the empty strip of sandy beach. Waves rolled up and down the shoreline like dough when Basil was rolling it out for cookies or pie. The shoreline was full of noises and movement, yet Charlotte was full of a sense of quiet and stillness she hadn't realized she needed. She sat down, sunk her toes into the cold sand, and welcomed the shiver that coursed through her body. She registered the sound of Bo's wings folding and the sand shifting as he sat down somewhere, but her eyes remained fixed on point where the liquid blue met the airy blue. How did the sea and the air feel about each other? How did they live life continually embracing yet remaining apart? Did they believe it would work, and so it did? Was that how marriage worked? She snuck a look back at Bo. He smiled a half smile back at her, but he didn't say a word. She smiled back at him. I love you, Wingard. I love you, soon-to-be Wingard. Charlotte laughed and jumped up. She ran to Bo and kissed him on the head. Tag, you're it. She squealed as he grabbed her leg and pulled her into his lap. He kissed her on the neck. Tag, you're it. Bo rolled away and got a head start, but Charlotte caught up with him. She kissed him on the shoulder and darted away. Back and forth they ran until Bo tackled her and kissed her on the foot. Game's over. He tickled her toes. Do you want to surf the waves a bit? Charlotte frowned. Can we go without being seen? Bo rolled his eyes. You didn't say one word when I flew you down here. I've been doing this my entire life. I know where I can go and not go, Lottie. We won't be seen. He placed his windboard down in the water. Now, are you ready? Bo was as steady on the water as he was in the air. His muscled legs controlled the board, while his wings were like sails. They traveled over the water for a couple of hours, enjoying the warm sun and sharing happy childhood memories. But most of the time they traveled quietly, content in each other's presence. The afternoon sun brought a surprise. A mermaid with short orange hair leapt out of the water next to them. Bo slowed to a stop. Soon 6 males and 6 females surrounded them. Charlotte recognized one of them from the Alliance meeting and another from occasional visits to the castle. One of the 12 had lived and worked with them several summers ago. The merman in the front of the group swam forward. Greetings, my name is Edmund. My brothers and sisters and I bring a message from our father Triton. Greetings, Bo said. What is your message? The orange-haired mermaid swam up to Charlotte and handed her a pale green glass bottle with a stopper on the top. My father speaks fondly of you, Charlotte. May I ask how you are, so I can tell him? So I may let him know. She was more formal. We have heard that you have undergone a powerful transformation, Edmund added. That's how Father found you, one of the younger mermaids said. Your body's changing the temperature of the water you touch. It's a small effect, but noticeable by my father. He sent out a scout earlier to find out what was changing the temperature. But surely I was only changing a very tiny amount of water, Charlotte said. It's a little more difficult to explain than a change of temperature, Edmund explained, but with everything that has happened lately, we've been on high alert. Charlotte took the bottle carefully from the girl, not daring to breathe until she knew that she had safely whisked it away and the girl was unharmed. I understand. Tell Triton that I am well and look forward to speaking to him again in person. I'm afraid we must leave now until such a time that we may visit longer. You may read the message, but please deliver it afterwards to Zarok or Lodestar. Thank you. Bo shook hands with Edmund. I wish your family well. Thank you, they all said in unison, as if they had spent part of their childhood practicing how to speak together. They were gone with 12 splashes. Charlotte yanked the stopper out of the bottle and pulled the message out. To my friends of the Alliance, it has come to my attention that I, even now, have traitors in my midst. I send this concern to you by my children, for I understand that some of my letters have not reached you. I will not be able to visit again for a short time while I deal with the situation here. I have learned that there are traitors dispersed everywhere, and that there are many strongholds across the country where this evil master of theirs is gathering items he needs to overtake us all. Please be cautious. Yours in Alliance, King Triton. Charlotte handed the message to Bo. We'll give this to Zorak as soon as we get back. When do you want to go back? Never. Let's move down here, get simple jobs, and live at the beach. She sat back and laid her head on Beau's shoulder. Doesn't that sound nice? It sounds like a waste of training. Charlotte scrunched up her nose. This is why Zorak always favors you. Zorak favors me because I don't mouth off. He stood and reached down. Let's get back to shore. My uncle was supposed to leave us a picnic basket for lunch. The sand was warm between Charlotte's toes as they walked hand in hand. Beau whistled one of the tunes he had sung to Charlotte that morning. It was a song about love and nests, and it made her giggle again, even though he only whistled it this time. Beau only grinned and whistled louder. She wrapped her hands around his face and smiled back. His free hand, his face, I don't know, one of the two. It actually says hand. Do you know how when you're reading, like sometimes you start to change the sentences, and it's really distressing me while I read this. It bugs me. But it happens in real books when I do it too. Anyway, back to the story. My books are real books. I'm having an issue during this. I'm so sorry. Okay. Tucked away in some trees a short distance from the beach was a small cottage. It was nothing more than one large room with a small bathroom, but it was clean and dry, and in the middle of a large room was a worn quilt and a picnic basket with cheese, crackers, fruit, vegetables, and bottled water. They ate and laughed and told each other secrets and stories from the last few years. Afterwards, they walked on the beach. I don't want this day to end, Charlotte admitted. The message bottle dangled from her fingers, swaying back and forth as she walked. Neither do I. Charlotte ran her fingers down Beau's arm. I don't want to forget what it feels like to have someone touch me. I don't want to forget what it feels like to touch other people. She settled her fingers into the palm of his hand. Do you think someday others will be able to be near me like you are now? The part of me that wants you to be happy thinks it's merely a matter of time. The part of me that wants me to be happy doesn't want to share. You're awful, Charlotte laughed. I'm only telling the truth. Charlotte tapped the bottle against her thigh. She kicked at the sand and tugged at Beau's hand. Beau, don't go tomorrow. He tugged back at her hand and stopped them both. Explain. Charlotte blinked back a tear. I've lost a lot of people I love recently, and I don't want to add you to the list. Beau sighed. Lottie. Beau, you are the only person who can touch me. I can't lose you. Charlotte. Beau took the message bottle from her hand and tossed it to the windboard. By the windboard. This isn't how we work, and you know it. Please. No, Cara Mia. Beau wrapped his arms around her and placed his head on her head. Charlotte buried her face in his neck. Dear Beau, I'm afraid. Dear Charlotte, we'll be afraid together. He tipped her face up and kissed her. When he finished, he whispered in her ear, Dear Charlotte, a man forgets fear exists while kissing you. I have to stop before I cry. Bye, guys.